This is the Gospel Revolution.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you see, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy.
Here's the founder and president of the Gospel Revolution, Michael Lilborn Williams.
Good morning, Daniel Thomas Rouse. How are you today? I know where you are, and I know how cold it is. I don't want to hear it. All right. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful.
It's hard not to talk about how cold it is, isn't it?
No, I'm nice and warm right now.
Oh, good.
And would you also welcome with us, Ethan Massengill. Good morning, Ethan.
Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, Ethan.
And Happy New Year to everybody.
Yes, it is that time of year. Holiday seasons. Everybody has an opinion, you know. They love them, they hate them, they don't care at all. And everything in between. As I get older, I do have a little bit more bah humbuggish in me. I think Ethan's worse than me, though. Honestly.
Oh, I just can't even tolerate it.
He's given up on life. I've hidden all the weapons and everything. So. Oh, goodness. But yeah, well, Happy New Year to everybody now that we've told you we really don't care. But we do care about you. Thank you so much for being a part of the Gospel Revolution in 2024. What a year. Oh, my gosh. I was talking with Jackie Barnard just the other day, and he was just overwhelmed with how many shows we've done on the 1,000-year reign. And I told him we are equally as amazed that we have done this. What an incredible thing. So ever since the last conference, and Daniel, do you know that we're going to have another conference coming up in just about 2 to 3 months?
Yeah, I'll be up there next month. We'll be preparing.
I know.
Or down there.
Yeah, up there, down there. You never know which way you're going to have to go to get to me. So we're very happy to be in a 2025. Goodness gracious, 25 years into the new millennium, and we're still here.
So, as the founder and president of the Gospel Revolution, have you received our prophecy for the year 2025?
Have I received the prophecy? Yes, I received the prophecy, and that is been fulfilled, that Christ has made the whole world righteous.
Oh, come on. What about us? What about right now?
There's part of me that kind of wishes that were a part of my life, our lives. But that also, I am so grateful it's not. The ambiguity of life, the wait and see and reliance on somebody else or something else to put wind in your sails or define who you are or what you're going to do just kind of sends a cold chill down my spine now. And yet we all live that way.
I sure did. And you know what, year after year after year, I was disappointed because it didn't work.
Never did it?
Nope.
No, it did not.
Yeah. I know in Ethan's church, they were up to date. Now, you may have been slacking a little bit about some of these things, Daniel, but Ethan was not. He was. There was no half-heartedness in his family or his church about these things. So, Ethan, how many fulfilled prophecies did you experience during your time?
Well, we looked in every direction, and we were disappointed by everything that came and went.
And how did you deal with the disappointment? Do you know? I remember that, but tell us how. How do you excuse that? How do you overlook it? How do you go into a depression or something?
Oh, you just use your buzz phrases. It's all in God's timing.
There
If
you
it doesn't
go.
happen today, it'll happen a year from now. If it don't happen a year from now, it'll happen 10 years from now.
Yeah.
But it's all in God's timing.
Yeah. Well, isn't that the truth? But so for those of you that have tuned in to find out what's going to happen in 2025, we're going to encourage you that Kenneth Copeland has it all figured out. So you can go listen to him. We actually
all the way to 2029.
To 2029. And what we can do is listen to Brother Copeland, and we can see whether or not what he says is true. However, he has never prophesied anything that ever was true to this point.
He was the biggest voice for our family because he always had that word for the year. And he was the one that we looked forward to hearing it. And we confessed it, and we believed it, and we pursued it, and we never obtained it.
Yeah.
Bring out the stones.
Yeah.
False prophet.
Yeah. So thankfully, we're starting out the new year fresh and new, but only as fresh and new as the year is. And we don't have a brand new gospel. It's the same one we've been teaching for decades. But what we've done in 2024, I think that our knowledge and understanding of the gospel of grace and the gospel of peace, that's what I was just thinking about recently, is that so many people have come in at so many different times. But it's amazing how quickly, no matter what teaching they come in, wherever we might be teaching it, the thing that they know is that the gospel revolution has two subjects: the gospel of grace and the gospel of peace. And that anything that we teach is going to be expounding on that. Now, what we have been on is the 1,000-year reign of Christ. I never, ever dreamed that in January of a following year, we would be continuing on a series that we did in the fall conference in Canada, and it still wouldn't be over. And no end in sight, the best I can tell, based on our most recent research. All we keep finding is more questions. So we slow down long enough to disseminate all of this, and to try to codify it, and so that it's in place, so that it doesn't go blowing in the wind when we move on to the rest of the story. But other than that, as of our most recent research, I think we're kind of calculating this is going to take a minimum, and this is just as far as we see, probably a minimum of at least 10 more. And we've already done, so that's going to take us up to 32. That's, everybody says that's how Jesus lived to be. So,
yeah, it really has been a wonderful experience. And, as I compare what we are learning versus what we had prophesied in the Word of Faith, what we are learning has affected my life far greater than any personal prophecy that I had ever received, chased, believed for, confessed, or anything. What we are learning has brought more peace. It has calmed my mind, and it has put my life at ease, and also given me great expectation for life in general. Not saying that trouble won't come and trials won't happen and all of that. I mean, that's going to happen to everybody. It rains on the just and the unjust. But the truth of the matter is no matter what comes at us, there is a truth that remains. And that is the prophecy that Michael gave us for the year, is that it's finished. It's done.
Yes, absolutely. and the effect of the gospel. Ethan, this has been an incredibly big year for you. Give us kind of a timeline as to how 2024 started. I can't remember. How did you start 2024? Were you already in Las Vegas, or were you still?
See, I was depending on you for this information because I don't.
Oh, that's how fast Ethan moves. He doesn't even remember the years.
I was here up until some point of this year.
Yeah.
And then
February.
February. I
Wow,
went to
thank
Las
you.
Vegas, and I was there for 9 months, and then I came back right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and what a whirlwind of a trip. He was able to complete a schooling while he was out there, and experience the nightlife of Las Vegas.
Viva Las Vegas.
The only thing that was missing was Elvis, but if he had lived during the 1,000-year reign, maybe he could have partied with Elvis too. We just don't know. But so it's been a big year for you guys. Gosh, you can stop and think about your progress that you've made over this last year, and that we've got a brand new year sitting here just waiting on us to discover and to grow, regardless of how things go on any level. The thing that we have is this very solidifying, stabilizing, and as Daniel said, mentally and emotionally, really stabilizing gospel that the everything else just takes a back seat to. We are informed people. We do know what's going on in the world. But it's just that everything that's going on certainly takes a back seat to the gospel, and it gets defined and absorbed and processed by a gospel brain. So, and let me tell you, the way that happens, all of you guys listening and all of us here, we know that that's different. Regardless of what happens, how we incur, endure, and recover from all loss, as far as the loss side of it, it's completely changed now.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what has happened. My sister passed right at the end of just before Christmas this last year, and it was the first of the 6 Williams children to pass. And so, kind of a seminal moment for our family in that, and me being the baby, which I love telling them how old I am, because that way I don't have to tell them how old they are then. Because this is getting serious. I'm telling you, we're down to some serious territory here. So anyway, we want you to enjoy 2024 with us. We may have done 21, 22 sessions now on the 1,000-year reign, but we don't see an end of that. So it looks like the last of 24 and going into 25, we're still going to be on the same subject.
And I'm here for it. I am excited and pumped up, and just real excited about what we're learning and what we're sharing. This is wonderful. It sounds like our listeners are having that same experience as we are.
Looks as though.
So what are we going to do today? If we're going to talk about it, what are we going to talk about?
Well, one of the things that we do need to go into more detail, we've had the wonderful 22 sessions, 21 sessions of explaining and looking at, learning, not just explaining, but just looking to see what the scriptures say about this 1,000-year reign. As we said, driving the nail at that point of the death, burial, and resurrection, and then taking our 1,000-mile string, and we found the 1,000-year reign beginning at David. Nobody's ever done that before, at least that are out there teaching it. We still can't find anyone else doing it. But the other event that I think, Daniel and Ethan, that we need to cover is at simultaneously or close to simultaneously event was that Satan was locked up for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, but after that 1,000 years, he is completely destroyed. So, so now you guys know that for at least a couple of decades, I was introduced by many people and many churches, big churches and little ones, as America's foremost authority on demonology. So I should know about all of this. So I'm going to give you all of my accrued wisdom of how to deal with the devil and which ones get in and which ones can get out, which ones come out by fasting and prayer, which ones are more difficult, the ones that stink when they come out. It was really tough to realize that I don't remember Norval standing up, but he had some poor lady in the floor casting the devils out of her near Atlanta, Georgia. And then there was all of a sudden this horrible smell. And Norval stood up and put his fingers on his nose like this and says, "Oh my God, that's like," and realizing, of course, having to realize and accept the woman passed gas, either that or it was normal, it might have been me and I was trying to hide it. We just said, yeah, boy, that demon. Ooh, that demon.
Whoever smelt it dealt it, as they said.
That's what we say in Tennessee, isn't it? So, but we think that it's probably a little different than what the America's foremost authority on demonology said. So here, once again, I get to say that I was wrong. And I can't believe just how wrong I was. There's a part of it that I'm grateful for because I know how easy it is to fall down a rabbit hole and take something that we do not understand, that we do not conclude as a finished work of the cross. And you can go into that to unbelievable degrees, just like people who study the angelic world. There are people who around this planet absolutely live their lives by the activity of not demons, but by angels appearing in their lives. And is that true? Well, we can resoundingly tell you that is not true. Now, you might wonder how we could have such arrogance to say we know that, but that's why you're listening, right? So
yeah, it is amazing the life that people live based on the influences of angelic or demonic outside forces. And goodness, I certainly had experienced that. Having, and I think I've always been a little skeptical about some of these things. I never really got into casting out devils, other than for myself. I certainly did that. I cast more devils out of myself than I did anyone else.
That's where they all were.
That's where they all were. But yeah, to realize and understand that all of that was a fake world. All of that was not real.
That's crazy.
And when you realize that, I think I shared this here a couple months ago about just walking through the mall. And I remember as a kid, my dad telling me, some of these stores, don't go in those stores, because they're just crawling with devils, because of the products that are sold in there. And then to take my little girls into those same stores today without any fear, any scared of anything jumping on them. I mean, and you get that, right? That I would do anything to protect my little girls.
Yeah.
And to be able to go from that point where I wouldn't step foot in there to feel comfortable bringing my children into that very same place. I mean, that's the evolution that has taken place in my mind. I mean, and it's wonderful.
So now tell us what kind of places, just to put some people's minds at rest. So, like, what kind of a store? Like, would they have? I know, like a Halloween store or something. Probably you would never.
Yeah, like a Halloween. One of the ones that you see in almost every mall is like a Hot Topic, and these are basically just stores where they have T-shirts and different cartoon characters. A lot
Oh
of
my God! And you taking
anime
your
stuff.
girls in there?
I have.
Oh.
You know, I bought one of them a little Hello Kitty purse from there the other day.
That's not a Hello Kitty. That's a Hell Kitty.
Oh Lord.
Oh yeah.
My goodness. You know, and yeah, I mean, so these are it wasn't some kind of porn shop or anything like that, you know, it was just
That's what we wanted to clarify for everybody.
Yeah. So where does this all begin? How do we walk this timeline out? So we're adamant about following the timeline.
Yeah.
And I think the clearest understanding of this comes from the Revelation. And if I could read a few verses from there,
Please.
and this will kind of give us some working room in which we can follow this story along and see what the Hebrew Scriptures had to say and other writers have to say about it. Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan. In case you're wondering what he's called, he just calls them all.
Exactly.
All the names that were given to him. And bound him for 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should not deceive the nations, no more until the 1,000 years were finished. But after these things, he must be released for a while. And I'm going to skip down to verse 7. Now, when the 1,000 years had expired, Satan will be released from this prison, and he'll go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. And fire came down from heaven and devoured them. The devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever.
Well, we certainly have we've got a hell of a story for you.
Yeah, for sure.
The things that are contained in here, let's skim across the surface and see what it's saying.
I just got your pun. A hell of a story. A little slow this morning.
I thought I was the one that was slow on the draw. This timeline, as Daniel said, we really love the timeline. Let me say right up front, as we have gone through the 1,000-year reign, while there is a degree, maybe we'll find it, but we're going to tell you right up front, there is a bit of ambiguity about the exact point. We've been able to find all of these exact points of starting, but there is no ambiguity about when this ended. All right, when this all came to an end, there is surprisingly the tail end of him where he was released. His release started at the last week of Daniel and went through the first 3.5 years of Jesus's teaching ministry. But exactly where it started is not as defined. We know that the tail end of this was he appears again after this 1,000 years of this is not a future event. I guess, we just assume people kind of know that, and that's not true. In fact, everybody out there except the GR think that the devil's out there running around right now doing things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of a group that doesn't believe that.
Right.
And but Satan's activity is recorded from the beginning of the ministry of Jesus all the way through the death, burial, and resurrection. And that's where his work is terminated completely. Now, we're giving you a lot, but we've got to give you the parameters that we've found. This is just what's there. This is just what's there. Now, so the beginning of this, the key to this, guys, and just correct me if I am going astray here, the issue here about Satan, the common thing before he is bound until he's released again, is his influence over the nations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. So the thing I want you to remember is the absolute control over the nations that Christ had during the 1,000-year reign.
Mm-hmm.
There's not one bit of that you see the prophecies, all of those. It's beginning to settle in my mind. See, all of those prophecies about all of the Greco-Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, all of them, those were prophesied years before they ever came into existence.
Mm-hmm.
And they all fit just perfectly. So what that tells us is there was no influence to alter that prophetic timeline. It is very clear that with all of these nations leading down to the feet of iron and clay, that this is during the reign of Christ. We see who is in charge over the nations, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is the history of them, their rise, their fall, who these people were, their names, how long they'd live. Much of that, if even if we don't have all of them, many of them are recorded as to who they were, and certainly descriptions of them and their lives are so explicit about their lives that it's very easy to spot them in history.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have is at some point during the first part of the 1,000-year reign of Christ, we have Satan being bound up. Why? Because he needed to be stopped from influencing what was going to happen in the nations. It wasn't that he was bound up so that he had stopped causing, people to be possessed, and he wasn't stopped because he was the bad guy only. He was stopped because something had to be completed, and then for a short time, after the completion of all of this historical time that Christ was reigning over, he had to be released for a short time. And then the next thing we know is that he is then completely thrown into the lake of fire.
Mm-hmm.
Our perspective in the Gospel Revolution, I'm going to turn it over to the guys then here to begin to break this down, is that at some point, and we'll go into details, where do we find Satan during the 1,000-year reign? But at some point, I have not found the exact point where he was bound, but it's obvious that he was. And then he's coming back, and look what he's doing. The very first thing when he tries to tempt Jesus is, I'll give you power over all the nations and the kingdoms of the world.
Mm.
So he was totally restrained from having any authority over that to being released. And then even his temptation to Jesus was to give him that, which it seems like Jesus had that for 1,000 years of history. Now we're looking at what we can see. From there, we will help us, and all you guys help us research. And please, we're just looking at what's there. We're not trying to put right hand on red and left hand foot on yellow. Gentlemen.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, even though we don't see a specific time when Satan is bound, and the point that he is bound in the abyss during the 1,000-year reign, we do have two pieces of evidence that reveal exactly what he was doing before he was bound up.
All right. Lay it on us.
Well, we see in 1 Samuel chapter 16, King Saul is under the influence of some type of evil spirit, and David has to go in and play the harp for Saul.
I think anybody that went Sunday school knows that, right?
And then the second time we see Satan influencing these authorities is David himself in 1 Chronicles. Satan basically tempts David into doing a census.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, the census was David's way of checking to see if he had the numbers to support an army for a future war. But that was looked at by God as disobedience because he wasn't relying on God as a source of strength.
Right.
And as a result, God sends I believe it's a famine, or he gives him a choice, and then I think he chooses a famine, but God ends up showing mercy. And then after that point, we don't see any more instances of Satan influencing authority for that 1,000-year period.
Wow. So that is interesting. So the last person's involvement with Satan recorded in the Hebrew scriptures is with King David.
Correct.
And the first person that we see in interaction with Satan is Yeshua, Jesus.
Yes, the son of David.
Wow.
So we got one of those things going on again here, folks.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we have going on is this bookend, at least to the beginning of the 1,000-year reign, King Saul, as we've shared before. And he seems to have had a lot of problems with the devil or demons. And David playing his harp, I think it says it's a harp.
Yes.
Yep, it does.
But him playing for Saul soothed him, and those evidently demons either like or don't like music. I haven't figured out which one that is. I mean, did they run from the sound of David's harp? I mean, if I played the harp, all devils would run and humans. But did they not like the peace of it? I'm sorry, I just have to think these things through. Was it such a consolation to Saul? Was it such beautiful? I mean, here that is so beautiful that it didn't make any difference what the devil did. He was just like experiencing peace. Did David have to play all the time? I mean, questions of a senior citizen, right?
So I was just looking here to see about what the time frame was that David would have done the census, and it looks like it was around 979 BC.
So about 30 years into his reign.
Yeah, this is where, as we were talking a little bit last week about this too, and even today, where this line is not completely certain for us about the 1,000 years. But even if you look at that and you look at, well, what point of David's life and what point of Jesus's life is this 1,000 years, constrained within? Either way, we're right in that ballpark of that 1,000-year reign, if I'm seeing that right.
I think one thing to note is probably the typology carries more significance than the exact dates.
We have that, and the fact that we do have approximately 30 years that's offset from the beginning of the 1,000-year reign, but you also realize that we have about 30 years offset at the end of it.
Right.
right? Because Satan is loosed. Satan is not loosed at the cross. Satan is loosed 3.5 years before the cross.
Right.
The amount of time that you just quoted sounds like about 3.5 years into David's ministry as king. And then we have this other 3.5 years at the tail end. I don't know which one cuts off which tails end. And right now we'll leave it alone unless we have a mathematician in the room. But we do see the ends of the beginning and the end of this 1,000 years, and that it is influenced a little bit differently than it shows up and disappears a little offset to the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Because what we were expecting, as you've probably heard us offer these expectations, was that these timelines were exactly together. That the moment that David started to reign, that's when Satan went into captivity. And the moment that it stops, which is at the cross, that's when Satan's reign ends. However, on closer examination, we found out that chronologically, or within the strict binding of time, if we do that, and what Ethan had to say also is that we can go with the symbolism of it. However, the fact of it is, we do see a little over 3 years difference at the beginning and a little over 3 years difference at the end.
I'm just the thing that I'm just mind blown about is that the last person to have this encounter with Satan is David, and the very first person is Jesus. And those are the bookends of the 1,000-year reign, is David and Jesus.
Well, it is absolutely, so it is mind-boggling. It is how much of this stuff have we, and you can tell folks, I realize I've started the same sentence 3 times, but that's where I am in trying to explain what I'm seeing and what we're doing. We see this incredible 1,000 years and 1,000 years. We have 2 1,000-year segments to deal with. To see now that the intensity of his influence over Saul, and also the influence of this temptation of David after being in the role as king about 30 years into him being king. And so you've got the 3.5 years and the 3.5 years. I think I may have said weeks earlier, but that was incorrect if I did. So you've got 3.5 years or so into David's reign. And so this really weird thing happens that David is why? Now I'm not asking leading questions because we know the answers. You're here where the sausage is being made, and why is it so damned important that the expression of Satan himself? Now think of all the things you learned in church about Satan. The deceiver. He grabs people by the neck. He causes car wrecks. He, goodness gracious. He does all these things. And what has he done to David? This is what he did to David. He caused him to have concerns as to whether or not his army was big enough to accomplish the things that God told him he was going to do. That's all I see, is that he caused him to doubt and be concerned about. Now, if I were God, I'd say, oh, look at my boy. He's heard what I've told him to do, so he's making sure he's ready. Well, that proves that I couldn't be God, at that time. So, but God took offense to that, and then sent this plague. The interesting thing about the plague, which I think may play out at the tail end of this, is that this plague ran all the way through Israel, right up to the doors of Jerusalem, and it stopped there.
Mm.
It stopped at Jerusalem. Jerusalem was not affected by this, by the consequences of David's actions in relying on a census, which was inspired by Satan. Oh man, let's look at this great evil. Oh my God. Satan tempted him to count to see how big his army was. Oh my God, I just can't believe it. Can you believe what that devil did? Honey, I've heard some stories about the devil that would curl your freaking toes. And this doesn't bother me at all. I mean,
right.
So what do we got, guys?
Yeah, that's the key frame in which Revelation points out is number one, we see that he's locked up for the purpose of not being able to deceive the nations anymore. And that's the very last reading that we have found. That's the very last account that we have found regarding Satan is a deception to David regarding deceiving the nations. And then the very first experience that we see with Satan coming back on the scene is the very same thing. Yeah. Jesus, as he was fasting, and he took him up onto the mountain and he showed him all of the nations
Jerusalem.
of. Yeah.
The last
he took him up.
I'm sorry, I've interrupted you twice, but I've got this picture in my head. This plague from the very last time that he had influence ran right up to Jerusalem. Now he's got the descendant of David. He's got the one that reigned for 1,000 years. He's ticked because he's been kept in prison for 1,000 years, and this Christ has formed world history free-handedly. Free-handedly, he has formed world history. Now that to me is influential. I don't understand this whole "don't do the census," but I'm going to do the census thing. But look at what happened to Jesus. You could tell the dude was ticked with the dude, right?
Right.
Because here he is. Now remember, the plague ran up to Jerusalem, went throughout Israel up to Jerusalem. Now Jesus is in Jerusalem on the mount in the middle of this area where the plague stopped, and now he's picked up with the son of David inside the gates where the plague did not reach for the disobedience of the first David. So here he is. And as Daniel is explaining, and I've interrupted him twice, I apologize. The processing of this and seeing this, the nations, it's about his influence over the nations, not your finances.
Yeah.
It's not about your health.
Come on.
There is none of that in here about Satan. Folks, we're talking about Satan, and it gives all of his monikers in Revelation, just in case you're confused. Oh, well, Satan's not the devil, or the devil's not the serpent, or the serpent's not Lucifer, and Lucifer's not. You can go through all of those games that you want, but Revelation wraps all of these up into one entity and his minions, if you will. So I'm just so captivated. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Daniel, what you do have to say, but I'm having to get this out of my mouth first, so that as you share on this and Ethan, that I'm able to comprehend what is even being said, because this is very powerful. Look at this moment. Look at this moment after 1,000 years. He is there 3.5 years before the crucifixion. At the very beginning, Jesus went through this baptism, went through the temptation, and went into his ministry. So we know exactly when this happened. So the power of what it was about and the temptation to his identity. I remember doing in depth the number one thing Satan wants to do is get you to doubt who you are. If you're the Son of God, if you're the Son of God. So that's what I relied on. And even in teaching demonology, I taught that the number one thing the devil wants to do is to cause you to doubt who you are.
I like that you pointed that out, Michael. So what I'm seeing is the devil plays a role in God's redemptive plan within that plan, as the role of the deceiver of the nations, which included an attempt to deceive the Christ into submission, the Christ that was already reigning for 1,000 years. This has nothing to do with, like I was always told growing up, God has a plan for your life, but the devil also has a plan for your life too.
Come on.
Yeah. And that was a total lie.
Did you just say that God used the devil in this great plan?
I did.
Wow.
He did.
That's interesting.
Get out the cross. We need another one.
We could almost, I mean, when you think about this, that statement that we've been using here a lot, had they known what they were doing with crucifying the Christ, they wouldn't have. And I think that's true too with Satan. Had he known that by crucifying the Christ, his end was going to be the lake of fire, you really wonder if he would have chosen that route. It's almost like God deceived the deceiver.
And of course, guys, that's where this shuffle, I'm telling you, it's frustrating because people want to either attribute this to that it was all man that crucified Christ, that it was all the devil, had nothing to do with God at all, or it was all God and had nothing to do with the others. And what Ethan has presented to us here is an incredible concept that God, in this 1,000-year reign and this development of events to bring the cross about, to merge God and man and the angelic world as one entity and to bring heaven and earth together as one thing, he used everybody. Everybody, including Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And because, Satan was a part of the problem before man was ever around. So we have got to incorporate this incorporation of God using all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And inadvertently, I remember reading the verses that and the prophecies about how Satan was brought down to the sides of the grave. So, so Satan and sin, let's call them synonymous right now. Okay, where did Satan sin end up? Satan's sin ended up in the grave. He ended up in the grave by being attached to Christ. And that sin was to destroy Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And then the plan of the cross, without foreknowledge by Satan, he attached himself and sin, if you will, to Christ. Because remember, we went through in detail about he that was knew no sin was made sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God. And those two made sin and made sin are not the same. The first made sin means like leached onto, grabbed onto, held onto. Mm-hmm. And the other one, when we were made the righteousness of God, it means a whole new creation. We are now the thing. Jesus wasn't the thing, sin. The thing, sin, Satan, Lucifer, latched onto him. And what, according to the prophecy, this is the picture it gives. Jesus had to go to death because, and I loved some of the things that I was seeing at the time, was that this was a blood leech. This was like a virus, and then I learned just in talking with one of my friends that's a doctor, that with viruses and things that are attached to the blood, once the body is dead, all of those diseases cease to function. Isn't that amazing?
Mm.
When the body dies, and I would think that the disease would just go on living. But it doesn't, especially blood diseases.
Mm.
Blood viruses that attach to the blood die immediately when the person dies.
Wow.
Then there are others that you have to stay away from the body because the body still has these living things on it, but not the blood diseases, not the blood viruses. They die when the body dies.
Mm.
Wow.
And somebody came out and somebody stayed.
Wow.
Ethan, I remember you said a statement about that, God has a plan for your life, but the devil also has a plan for your life. Did you ever hear the one that, this was one that we talked about all the time, that what the devil meant for evil, God meant for good? Did you ever hear that one?
I did too.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What a contradictory line of thought, I have to say. How can God have a plan, but the devil have his own plan?
That's
but
funny.
They're crossing over.
And it's up to you to determine which one's going to get their way.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think what we're seeing here is, God had a plan, and he used Satan within this plan, and that doesn't carry over past the second death, past the termination of the blood virus, if we're going to go with that analogy. So what I'm seeing, if this line of logic didn't apply then, it can't apply now. Yeah. And by doing so, you're kind of equalizing Satan and God.
Wow. Now, there was a time where this would have been something that was an active plan when the devil was free, when Satan was free. For example, speaking of Joseph, and this is where the statement comes from that I was taught growing up, Genesis 50, verse 20, speaking of Joseph. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. So this motion that was working for evil, this motion that Satan had going for evil, God took that motion and he made it something beautiful. And that is the predestined plan of God. That's why Satan was bound up for 1,000 years. That was part of the plan. Also part of the plan was that he was going to be released, and knowing that he was going to be released, what was he going to do? He was going to deceive the nations. And that was part of the plan. That was part to bring this about into motion. Now, Michael, here's my question to you about the mystical view of this. Because the mystics teach that the cross wasn't God's plan.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That it was the devil's plan. And what do we do with that? Having this information here. So we see the devil's plan at work, but we see that the devil is actually ultimately part of God's plan. Who is then responsible for the death of the Christ?
Well, first off, my most theological and deepest held opinion about the mystics' view, and I don't mean to get so philosophical and so deep into it, but honestly, my response to the mystics about their view of this is
there's that sneaky demon again.
I just and I know these people. They are brilliant. They're kind. They're wonderful. gosh, if we could just label them as demonic or something to rid ourselves. But I've been on the end of that being dismissed because I disqualified from being a holy man. And I don't want to disqualify what anybody says because of who or what they are. However, I don't know anything bad about any of these people. Not a thing. I have never heard anybody say anything now against, good Lord, let us go through the names that I was involved with over the years. The only one that I know that I could not say anything of a story is like, yeah, I know what you did. The only one that I don't have on any of those guys is John Osteen. John Osteen was just, I still love that man. He was someone concerned with the hearts of, and regardless of his views, and regardless of his devastating and revealing response to me after 4 days, that he couldn't find anything wrong with what I was saying scripturally, but he couldn't teach it. But the rest of them, believe me, I've got all the stories because I was on the hotline with everybody who was inside these ministries and the stories they had to tell. These guys are mystic friends. They are just, I swear, I don't know where I came up with such a nice group of people. They are really wonderful people. They get a little snarky, a little snippy. I think that's what was the other moniker that we gave them. Snippy's not a really horrible thing to call somebody, right? But this dogged determination, and I have to say dogged determination to scrap not just anybody else's thought about this, but every single verse in the scriptures, New Testament or the Old Testament being scripture, especially when they are questioned, and especially Isaiah 53. I mean, this plan was laid out in the, yes, I've been angry. Yeah, I did all this. It's God's confession that he did all these things. And he says, but the time's coming when I won't be doing it anymore. And tells us exactly what the event that is going to happen to cause it to never happen again. They will not touch this chapter. They will not. 52 and 53. So, our only goal in approaching what our mystic friends are saying is that we are so persuaded that the gospel is the power of God unto the salvation, the saving of the soul, as best we can understand it out of Romans. That if what they are saying, which we are convinced of, is untrue, they are missing some equitable understanding of the power of God. Because there is a conflict that they have to resolve because God hasn't resolved the conflict. This conflict resolution of the cross is the template by which we have internal conflict resolution. It's how we come to peace with ourselves, is this conflict between God and man. And even he used the devil to get the plan done. But if there is no scriptural conflict, they whitewashed God into being this. God is love, God is light. And that's it. That's it. And then they turned those phrases on their end and they said, well, God is love and love is God. So then God is light and light is God. But that's like saying poodles are dogs and dogs are poodles. It just doesn't work both ways.
That's good.
Just because you say something one direction and it's accurate in its statement doesn't mean when you reverse it that you have to come up with the same equation.
That's called, I actually remember this from taking a logic class. That's a form of false logic.
False logic. It is a form of false logic. And saying that God is love. Now, I'm sorry if some of you it's going to blow your mind to know that God is love and love is God. God is light and light is God is false logic.
It's in I think it was labeled an invalid argument or invalid conclusion.
It's definitely an invalid comparison. Yeah. So, and we accept that verdict on this type of logic. The other thing that I can't help but bring out, but that both of these statements, God is love and God is light, the only places it's stated is in 1st and 2nd John. And this is the guy who's got the whole world confessing sin. Now, I can't blame him for the whole world pursuing the Antichrist, but he's the only one who brings up the term. But he certainly never, the one thing I credit him for is he never wrote to anybody about an individual person being Antichrist. That was all created by Christians. So anyway, we will go into that more. If you have any questions about that, we would love to pursue it even more. So the ability to do what Ethan has just explained and to accept the fact that now no longer can happen or would happen is that God enveloped Satan into his plan, and Satan himself helped carry out the plan that actually destroyed him.
Just wanted to point out, I didn't mean to go back, but that form of logic is called a fallacy of the converse, also known as affirming the consequent.
Wow.
If the fallacy occurs when somebody assumes that if A implies to B, then B must also imply A.
Yeah. And that really is very true. I remember, and people fall for it very easily, that non-logic logic. A equals B, therefore B equals A. And that's just not, it's rarely ever true. Rarely ever true. And I can tell you in this case, it is not true. And like I said, we got to be a wonderful series to go into just on that subject. And because it is the tripwire that gets people, those statements is part of the tripwire who gets people stuck in not being able to complete a thought about anything. Because these things, when you come to these false conclusions, you can't think any further. So that's why we point out these things. Why? Because we've done it. We've had all of the false conclusions based on false logic, and we've had to extricate our own false ways of coming to conclusions, just like confirmation bias. We've had to address that to make sure that we're not trying to find something to make us right. The only way we would have ever admitted that the timeline between, because we've told you all of this time, that there were two co-existing statements about a 1,000-year reign, and that is the 1,000-year reign of Christ lasted the exact same amount of time as the 1,000 years that Satan was bound. Now look what we've had to do. We've had to come in and tell you, thanks for playing. We were wrong. But because we know that we can accept that we are wrong, then it gives us the opportunity to go on and continue learning. Just think if we had to have confirmation bias, the shoehorns we would be using trying to make this work. But we admit we were wrong, and now we're learning. Daniel, I don't know if I answered your question or not. I think Ethan
You
had
did.
a lot of good things to say about it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I think a lot of this that we have talked about I think it's going to be easy for most people to accept and swallow and to realize that, okay, it's very obvious that from David to Jesus, at the very least, you have to say there is minimal satanic activity. And but we see there's no account of it.
No.
But I think the challenging one for people to grab a hold of is the fact that the devil, Satan, he was not just removed from the scene, but he was completely destroyed after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And he is totally inactive today.
Yes.
He has nothing. He is doing nothing. He's not in existence anymore. And I think we should look at that a little bit and look at some of the writers and what they have to say about that. Of course, starting there in Revelation, that he was thrown into the lake of fire. And that is totally being removed from the scene. And he is totally not there.
Yeah.
You think about the ministry of Christ. Do you remember when he cast all of those, the legion into the swine? What was their response? Have you come to torment us before our time? So they even knew. They knew that they were on a clock. The demons, the devils, they had this ticking time clock that their end was coming.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the statement that Jesus made, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but we just looked at the judgment side, and that's John 12 and verse 31. Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. So not only did Jesus receive the judgment of the world, but also he told them that the ruler of this world would be cast out. Hebrews echoes that thought, and we went into this a little bit more because Hebrews sees it a little bit different, but he does see something about the devil, and that's Hebrews 2:14. Inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is the devil. So here we have two verses. Number one, we have Jesus saying that, well, let me look at three. We have three verses. We have the devils knowing that their time is short. We have Jesus stating that the ruler of this world is going to be cast out. And then we have Hebrews stating that the devil will be destroyed. And of course, Revelation is that he's going to be thrown in the lake of fire. I mean, it's very clear that this isn't just a binding as it was during the 1,000-year reign, but this was actually a destruction.
It was a total destruction also.
Yeah, a total destruction brought on by a trap set by God, which was the cross.
One interesting thing here, guys, that statement about the devil, the demon speaking, it does not say, have you come to torment us before our time? It says, have you come to torment us before the time? Now, what that does is align more that the issue wasn't about the demons, it was about the time.
Yeah.
Which God had control over.
Yes, God had control over the time. And that is what we are emphasizing here. I've always quoted this exactly the way you just did, Daniel, which was wrong. But
hey. I love you too.
We get a lot of pleasure out of pointing out each other's faults. I've always said, have you come to torment us before our time? I think it's because Daniel's been listening to me. But that drew my attention when you said that. I thought, wait. So it means a set or proper time. Always. It means due season. Short time. And they knew that their time was short. even at this point, they knew the time was short. It is just, it's a tiny little word, but boy, it sure does add a pack a punch.
The time was set, and the trap was also set.
Yes. Gosh, so beautiful.
And the trap was the cross of Christ. And we see that after Jesus' refusal to submit to Satan when he's offered the kingdoms of the world, I think the next best thing that Satan has is he goes after Jesus.
Yeah.
God leads Satan into the possessing Judas to orchestrate this crucifixion that God had planned.
Well, and isn't it funny that even demons knew all of this was about the time, not some other time, not a distant time, but a short time, according to the word used in the Greek, kairos. They knew that it was about the time. The decisiveness of this moment is so mind-boggling. Folks, we have lived out a history we should not have lived. If we had accepted the time that the demons were dreading, if we had seen the time that God had prescribed, if we had seen the time end of the 70 weeks of Daniel, the time of the 1,000-year reign, the time of the confining of Satan, the short time of his release, and then the conclusion of all of those. So just think of all the doctrines that you hear. This is an absolute fact. Every doctrine that you hear today is in a church of some 46,000 denominations that has no clue that the devil, his angels have been, and you say, oh, they're there burning now, I just can't handle it. This fire is a consuming fire. It's not, it's not one that torments and tortures, it consumes. Our God is a consuming fire. So there's not something left there whining and wailing and rolling around in torment about these things. So the fire is a fire that consumes. But the other end of this story, so we took care of Satan. All right, so first off, how many gospel messages are devoid of some complication with having to deal with the devil to live your life? I mean, it's fraught. Oh my gosh, to the point. Last thing I said to Ethan on the way up the stairs, we talk until one of us passes out, and it's usually me. And I'm headed up the stairs. The comment that was coming to me was this reality of what I had taught all of my life on demonology. And then suddenly there's this absolute reversal of thought. And that was the thing that took me to bed last night, was this thought of the incredible transformation of thought from the man who was by others, not by myself, in many cases, not all cases, and not by all people, called and respected as the America's foremost authority on demonology. So I heard that little snicker. The power of that moment for me to come to a realization that Satan and all of that little list that's there, he's gone. He does not exist. If we destroyed every sermon that included the opposition that Satan has to life or living, I think that would cut out about 70%, 60 to 70% of all sermons, number one. Now, what if we cut out all sermons that had to do with how to get closer to God? how to communicate with God. What if we throw all them out? I think that just with those points, we have thrown out every single sermon ever preached by any one of the 46,000 denominations. Because the issue of the work of the cross is the expulsion. Everything that could possibly defile the temple was taken out and it was destroyed. And the temple then becomes the temple of our God. That mankind, God chose us as his temple. And this is where he lives in the human race. There's no appealing to an external God. There is no external or internal devil. So the psychology of this suddenly changes the psychology of the entire human race and says to us, we are trapped in an imaginary world.
Mm-hmm.
By the Catholic Church, by the Pentecostal Church, Methodist, Baptist, it doesn't make any difference which one. You say, but what about the other religion? We're not dealing with them. We're talking about the ones that use Scripture to try to come up with something. Most all of these are influenced by this lunacy that the people who rely on or claim to rely on Scripture have come up with. So this absolute change is as drastic as the world before the flood to the world after the flood.
I have a couple questions about that change, but before that, I want to try to get some clarity on one thing, because I know there's going to be some people bringing this up. These other words that are used, Jesus said it in John 12, the ruler of the world.
Oh, good.
Paul called him the God of the age. Hebrews calls him the devil. And of course, we have that list there in Revelation about Satan, devil, and the dragon. My question is the God of this age and the ruler of this world, is that the devil?
Ethan, what have you found?
I'm going to say yes.
You got your answer.
Well, there it is. Well, and I think, if we look at the one that Jesus said, so now the judgment of this world, now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of the world is cast out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes back to the deceiving of the nations, doesn't it? Is that, how is it that Jesus, who was sitting at the right hand of God, how is it that he was taken up to the pinnacle?
Yeah.
And the devil came to him and said, you can have it all. How could that be true if he wasn't the ruler of this world? Is that right? How could that be true if he wasn't the God of that age?
At least for a short time.
Yeah.
Right.
For the short time he went back to doing the thing that he was bound up for in the first place.
I think that's brilliant. But boy, did he immediately reassume his role.
Mm-hmm.
But it was time now to deal with him.
Yeah,
So God is the one that released him for a short time, but it was for him to participate in his own entrapment.
Yep.
And he did exactly what was prescribed by God to do. Jews and Gentiles. So who's responsible for the death of Jesus? According to everything we can find, it was the Jews. It was the all of the leaders and authorities in the Jewish community, all of the leaders and authorities in the Roman community, all of the Gentiles are listed, and all of the kings of the earth. That's what it says. So now we're beginning to see how all of the kings of the earth participated in the crucifixion of Jesus, because all of these kingdoms that built during the 1,000-year reign were all set there to bring about one single event, and that is the cross.
My goodness.
So we have 1,000 years of history, but now we know that it's bigger than that. It goes all the way back to, as John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, the Word was God, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. But let's take just that 1,000 years in which Christ was reigning at the right hand of God, as David said in Psalms 110, verse 1. He was observing this at the time. And he said that God said, that the Lord said to my Lord, we broke down those words, but the Lord said to my Lord, sit here at my right hand until the enemy is made your footstool. The enemy was death.
Mm-hmm.
And that was achieved, but it was achieved by, number one, putting Satan on restraints. Let me create. He's not asking Satan permission. What he's doing is saying, I'm going to create and direct every part of nation building and destruction that will point to where the world cannot miss that I now have become a part of humanity, and humanity has become a part of me, the angelic, and all together. And they will be able to see, because of this history I'm developing and this genealogy that I'm developing, they will be able to see that Satan only got another little breath for 3.5 years. And there was a 3.5 years beyond that prophesied.
Mm.
And we've got to go into that. We've got to go into and show you all of what was prophesied for the 3.5 years that got cut off. It dominates. That 3.5 years that was cut off dominates, and it goes into detail in Revelation as to what was going to happen in that 3.5 years. But we can show you where it got cut off. And because we know where it got cut off, we can tell you what's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we found out was one of the things that's never going to happen was 666.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, spoiler alert, we told you that on the last one if you didn't get it.
Another thing was Satan was going to raise up an army.
Yep.
Against the city of God.
Yep. And
just kind of like that plague that was coming to get Jerusalem,
and now,
but was cut off.
And Satan was now going to come after the holy city.
Mm-hmm.
But it all got cut off because everything, all prophecy transferred into the body of Christ. All prophecies about judgment, the fulfillment of prophecy, the fulfillment of salvation, redemption, the prophecy of the judgment of the whole world, and everybody's going to die. And all of that in the body of one man. And he took Satan into the process. He took him into Satan did not take God or Jesus into his process. God took Satan into his process, and he had no choice in the matter at all.
And I would say that go even further and say that Christ went into this realm of death that Satan was active in.
Yeah, which was the grave, and all the things about death that can be conceived. He went into death and defeated death itself.
And we have a beautiful picture, I think, from going back to the Hebrew scriptures and the story of Joseph.
We've got to go back to that.
Yeah.
Tell us all about this, Ethan. This is beautiful.
So as we know, Joseph was also deceived and was carried away by this plan that the brothers had devised against him. And we see later on, as Joseph goes through this process in Egypt, with the situation that happened in Potiphar's home with Potiphar's wife, and not submitting to her authority, essentially led Joseph into the prison. But it comes to find out, while Joseph has this experience of being in prison, he's put in charge of the prison. He has access to the keys as well. Just like when Christ entered death, I think it was it Hebrews or Revelation that points out that Christ has the keys
Yes.
of death in Hades.
Exactly like Joseph had the keys to his prison.
Exactly like that.
And then, of course, Ethan, the entire thing, no one knew that everything they were doing, his brothers who intended evil, right? His brothers intended evil. And so even Joseph had a response to his brothers.
Yeah.
And whatever the father's intent was or was not, it became irrelevant. Whatever his brother's intent was or was not became irrelevant. Whatever the Nebuchadnezzar's intents were, whatever they were, became completely irrelevant because it was God's plan that was relevant.
Yes.
Wow. You guys are good. Okay. So we know the God of the age, the ruler of the world, the devil, Satan, the dragon, all of these have been destroyed.
Yeah.
So, Michael, if I can, I want to go back to your big change, this change that took place in your understanding from being the foremost authority on demonology to now understanding that all of this has been destroyed some 2,000 years ago. What about all of those experiences you had? What do you do with that?
They were delusional, illusional. They were farts. And we don't even know who did it. Nobody got a revelation. But my goodness, folks, I remember being at the Hilton Hotel somewhere around Indiana-ish, and we were casting out devils in the Hilton ballroom. The workers were coming to the doors from the kitchen and from every door that had a peephole or a door where they could get away quick. And they stood there and looked in like, what in the holy heaven or hell are these people doing? And we were, people were screaming. I had my hands on people that were fighting and yelling and screaming. Of course, we had helpers there to restrain them. I couldn't restrain the devil, but I could cast them out and other people had to hold them. So I'm surprised we did not get arrested. I'm telling you. And so this demon casting out session that started there at the Hilton Ballroom. Most people have done this stuff in little backwoods churches here and there and places where it's all understood. We did it at the Hilton Ballroom. And
wow.
And so we could not, this woman was a self-professed witch. And so we knew we had a big job on our hands. And so they told us that we're going to have to get out of the ballroom. And so somebody went to their room and got the bedspread off of, those nice thick comforting bedspreads. And we rolled that woman up.
Oh my God.
In a bedspread. And it looked like we were carrying out a rug. And except the rug was fighting us and wiggling, and we had her wrapped up like a hot dog. And we carried her out of the Hilton, out to where the shrubbery and stuff was. And we laid her under the bushes and we kept casting the devils out of her.
Oh my God.
I don't know if we destroyed the bedspread or not. I can't remember all of that. Believe me, there's probably part of me that has gently erased a lot of these memories. But whatever happened to that poor woman, I do not know. But that was the extent that was one of. That's only one of hundreds of wild stories I could tell you. And now, to answer your question, it was all bullshit.
Wow.
And I know
Wow.
it was. When the mind gets convinced there is separation from God and vulnerability to the devil, the mind begins to find a way to not be vulnerable to the devil and to gain access to God.
Mm-hmm.
And it will create any scenario that it needs to create. Anything. Your mind is now vulnerable to anything anybody says.
Oh, and those smells and odors and whatnot, those are very real,
Yeah.
Michael. I mean, I remember there was a service. This lady, she was obviously had a legion of demons in her just based on the lifestyle that she lived that everybody knew about. It was perceived as worse than, the rest of the congregation. So I remember the worship leader standing up on stage and then points out to her, Satan, Legion, you come out in Jesus' name. And I remember vividly watching her face wrinkle up and turn into this devilish looking figure. And I could have swore that I saw that her face changed. So I know that what you're saying is true, that the brain will, it's like seeing something in the clouds, or see, I used to see figures and faces in the bushes because it was my brain looking for that my own bias about these things.
It's amazing when you look at the groups, and Michael, I'm sure you saw this as much as you traveled. There was always a little variance in how people thought that this manifestation would happen. And if you were in that particular group, that's how it happened. Whether it was foaming at the mouth, whether it was a screaming, vomiting. I mean, that was a real thing. I mean, they had vomit bags that unless you vomited, that devil wasn't coming out. And, we laugh about this, but I mean, this is people have really experienced this stuff.
Yeah.
And it just depended on the group that you were in, and they had this different response to what it was supposed to look like if they were really possessed by the devil. And coincidentally, if you were in that group, that's exactly how the devil manifested.
Absolutely wonderful point to make, Daniel, is that if it's the devil, wouldn't the devil manifest uniformly instead of based on your perception of what it's supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
And some people totally believed that if you just walked up and said, come out in Jesus' name, okay, it's gone.
Yeah.
And, thank you.
Right.
And all the way to that they fight and they, the things that Norval stories, and you got to understand that Norval's teacher was Lester Summerall. You talk about a demon casting out man. Lester Summerall and I had developed a ministerial relationship also. And I went and spoke for him several times in his studio and at his church, and his sons. Oh my gosh, I could tell you stories that it's just not even. I can't tell you some of the stories that I have. I cannot tell them. But the difference just between Norval and his prescribed casting out devils and Lester Summerall and his teachings about casting out devils, you could tell. You're exactly right. You could tell the group you were in, because the demons would not manifest in any way other than what had just been preached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's a trick of the mind, folks. I know that for those of you that are in it right now, number one, if you're in it right now, you haven't listened this far anyway. So, but it is something that we would love to help people think through and to get out of. The power that we are talking about is this all-inclusive, whether we're talking about the 1,000-year reign of Christ, the power of turning that thread. Daniel, what a life-changing event. The day that we accepted Paul's declaration about death being defeated at the cross. And we took that little string and we took it every direction. And it wound up, well, how long was David before the cross? 1,000 years. And then not just to have that, but every scripture lined up with that this was David and Jesus is David. And David is the type and shadow of the Christ. This beautiful story that Ethan has just presented to us. Joseph, everybody knows Joseph as a type and shadow of Christ, but they've not really ever gone through a lot of these details, just about having the keys, about what Ethan quoted to me out of that story, what Joseph said to his brothers, what you meant for bad, God meant for good.
Yeah.
You got trapped in God's plan, So, but the other important thing, yes, all of this happened. Yes, God did this interaction dance with the devil, if you will, and yes, Jesus, or the Christ, developed all of these forms of governments to help us understand the finality of the work. But the point is not all of these things so that we can now know how to duplicate or integrate these things into our lives. It's so that we can allow them to organize our brain now in understanding freedom. Because it is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Jesus didn't set you free to use you. Jesus didn't set you free for you to go do anything. Jesus didn't set you free so you can now keep the law. Jesus didn't set you free so you can go into the ministry. Jesus didn't set you free now so that everything about you can change. Jesus set you free so you could be free. And this is the gospel message that only deconstruction of every single doctrine that is out there will ever allow people to move into what we are teaching and understanding about what Paul's gospel is. And now I'm not ashamed to tell you there's only one man in the New Testament that had the mystery and was appointed to the ministry and was given the mystery of the gospel, and that's Paul. I encourage you to read all of them, but you should read all of them to compare to Paul's teaching and then compare all of them to the scriptures. And that little quote formula, unquote, has worked for us to this very PowerCast.
And I have one more question before we close out here today. And because we've been asked it before, and I can tell that it's probably going to happen again if we don't answer it here about this topic. So we're declaring that the devil, Satan, Lucifer, the dragon, the god of this world, the ruler of this age, has been destroyed.
Yes.
How can we say that when we look around the world today and we see so much evil, we see terrible, terrible things happening? And I think there's probably even gospel revolutionaries who might even think that this is the work of the devil. How can we be so confident in knowing that the devil, Satan, has been destroyed when all of these terrible things are happening around the world today?
Very powerful question indeed. All right. So here's where, as in my decades of being transformed into understanding the gospel, I've had partners in the gospel who have come to this point that they misguidingly have stated that there is no such thing as good and evil, because they see that they equate Satan with evil and God with good. Well, if there is no such thing as evil anymore, then there's no such thing as good. You can't take out one of something that is said to be a part of another and leave just one of it there and the other totally gone. The issue is not whether or not there's good and evil. It is, do we have the brain to handle good and evil? Do we have the brain to know what is good and what is evil? And then can we handle and do something about the evil? Can we promote good? And the people that stick their head in the sand and say, no, I don't see evil. No. And you know, they're out there as much as I do.
Yeah.
I don't see evil. They're all over Facebook like crazy. Well, I just don't see good and evil. I'm not. That's what, and many of our mystic friends go here. They say that's what man's understanding got opened up to, that now we've got to change that, is he saw good and evil. So the goal then becomes to not see good or evil.
Well, just turn on one cycle of world news, and I'm sure you'll find plenty of evil.
Turn on Clarksville News, right?
The local news.
Yeah. So, yes, truer words never spoken. So here, as we're wrapping this up, Daniel, as you were letting us know it's time for us to go, is this vitally important. Folks, we promise you we're not going to drop you here. We're not going to leave these questions unaddressed. And we're still looking for answers. You've got to understand that. Please help us look. And one of the ways of helping us look is to keep questioning us about the clarity of what we're saying, because we may mistakenly think that we have stated it clearly, when based on previous thoughts that had been ingrained into many of your lives and mine and Daniel's and Ethan's. We may not have said the right thing the right way to cause the deconstruction of these previous things to the point to where that you can accept the ultimate reality, and that is there is no devil to deal with. There is no Satan. There is no entities of or thereof. There is no wicked one. There is no ruler of this world. All of those. Daniel, thank you so much for holding our feet to the fire on all of these things. How many times I've had correspondence and questions. Well, I believe that the ruler of this world is talking about Jesus in chapter 12 of John. No, that Jesus was cast out, that was all about him. No, it absolutely was not. Because we now have the timeline, and all of this fits together with prophecy as to who this was. This was Satan.
Yeah.
And the Revelation gives us such a wonderful, don't make no difference what you call him. He's gone.
Yeah.
That's what Revelation says. Call him what you want. Call him the serpent. Call him the dragon. Call him the beast. Call him Lucifer. Call him Satan. Call him what you want. He's done for.
I think even Jesus himself said, I saw Satan get cast out like lightning.
Falling from heaven like lightning. And another very provocative statement that we need to understand more. But the fact of it is that we, what was Jesus saying and for what time frame? But we know it's cast out. That's the ultimate. We know that the book of Job, let me address this because some will have questions about it. The book of Job is, by all possible research into the timeline of what is written in the Hebrew scriptures, the book of Job and this free coming and going between heaven and earth that is listed in the book of Job is well before the 1,000-year reign. They don't. Job does not have a timeline. It seems to be just somewhat disconnected from a framework. Unlike other books, we can say, well, this happened during this time and this happened during that time, or under this king's reign, or under that, under Moses, or before Moses, or whatever.
Mhm.
But you got to understand the book of Job has none of those.
Yeah, that's good to point out, Michael. Just because the Bible has books listed in a certain way doesn't mean that they're in chronological order.
Especially the book of Job and others, as Ethan has pointed out. The others give us, whether or not they are in chronological order or not, the writings themselves tell us what order they are.
Mm-hmm. And Job does not.
And Job does not. Now, it may be there, and I haven't found it, but look at the activity. I mean, he's blah-blahing. I mean, he's not just showing up. He's blah-blahing to Job. He's blah-blahing to God. He has free access to both places.
Mm-hmm.
So not only when he gets bound, he no longer has access to many things, including God. I mean, it's like you almost hear God saying, thank God we shut him up for a while, you know. But he knew for the human race that shutting him up for his own sake was not the goal. The goal was to free the human race from this entity. Much to learn. Folks, we are not telling you about how much we know. We're actually revealing to you how little we know. And because from where we stand, all we see is mountains of research in front of us. But we're not daunted. Please don't get daunted either. Because we're excited about this. I want everyone to be able to not feel the weight of the future. Folks, we in the Gospel Revolution, if what we're saying is anywhere near truth, the weight of the future of the world is on our shoulders. But I don't feel that weight. But I do feel the fire to do it. Now, there's something that, and I know you guys know the same thing. There is this fire. You can use many metaphors if you want. There's this eagerness, this willingness, this desire to move forward and to keep learning. And when I first woke up this morning, I thought, God, I've learned so much. We've gone so far. Why the hell don't we just quit? I have to tell you, that was my first thought when I woke up. Instead, we got to do this show, Why don't we just quit? Why? With all the earnesty in my heart that I can present this to you, this morning, I wanted to know, why don't we just quit? Now, gospel revolutionaries, you need to answer that question as much as I need to answer that question. As much as Ethan and Daniel needs to answer this question. Why don't we just quit? Don't we have enough to live off of the rest of our lives? I do. I don't need to know another thing to be able to live in peace and to be absent of any threat from the devil or any feeling of isolation from God. I don't need another thing. So why don't we quit? And each person needs to answer that question for themselves. I don't quit for probably a list of reasons. It's just too fascinating. It's too intriguing. And one of the reasons is I know the suffering of being under doctrines that caused me to feel separated or alienated from God, or terrified and talking to the devil. The last thing I said to Ethan going upstairs last night was, I'm still amazed by the fact that when I stopped talking to the devil he stopped talking to me.
Hmm.
And that's what I went to bed on. And then I woke up this morning saying, why the hell don't we just quit?
One of the things I'm thinking about here now is, now that we understand that the devil's been destroyed, that that's been put away with, maybe that's the starting point to understanding, as Michael was going through, how do we walk through, how do we navigate through life with the knowledge of good and evil? Well, the number one thing is that you can understand is that there is not an outside force, neither good nor evil, neither angel nor devil, neither God nor Satan, that are influencing your day-to-day life, which means the responsibility lies upon you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that personally is that when I stopped looking for an outside force to influence my life, I then understood that I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for my decisions. And in doing that, it gave me, was it a huge change? I mean, talk about change in life. Oh my God. You know, and there are times that I wish there were outside influences influencing my life and telling me when to turn left and when to turn right, which job to take and who to marry and, you know, all of that. There are times that you wish that there was somebody, something out there making that decision for you, but the reality of it is there isn't. And now you're left with that choice and that freedom to choose and to live your life.
And me and Michael talk about this all the time. We have the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
We think back before the garden, before Adam and Eve, before the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The only person that would have had access to the knowledge of good and evil would be God himself.
Right.
So I think me and Michael talk about this a lot. The problem is Adam and the Adamic race didn't have the mind of Christ. They didn't have righteousness. They weren't able to handle the tree of knowledge of good and evil when they partook of it. So they entered into the death. But now we have the mind of Christ. We can handle the knowledge of good and evil. Yeah. We can make decisions about our own life because we are one in Christ.
Powerful. We just need a neon sign with all that written on
it. So yesterday, I want to share an experience I had yesterday as we were preparing for this. I was in my bedroom and I had the door closed, and we finished our call, and I walked outside, and my bedroom is at the top of the stairs, and Naomi was sitting on the top stair and listening. Now she could only hear my side of the conversation. And I opened the door and she said, "What did you say you're going to do with the devil?" And it kind of shocked me for a second. And I said, "We're going to get rid of him." And she says, "Oh, yay. Good job." So did we do a good job today? Did we get rid of him?
I think the prophetess was correct. Good job.
Oh, she had a look of terror on her face. What are you doing with the devil?
Yeah. What a wonderful way to be able to respond. And just, as we're wrapping up here, gosh, I am, oh my gosh. I began this journey alone as far as other human beings are concerned. And I stayed alone for at least 20 years. To be where we are, to know that that through the rest of this process, I'll never be alone doing it ever again. I will never be alone doing this. And because I not only have Ethan, goodness gracious, living here at the house, and this is what we talk about all the time. And I can say that almost without any ambiguity at all. I mean, it's most all conversations are about this. And Daniel, oh my gosh, that we have the insights and things from these two gentlemen, and from so many of you. Your insights are profound. We need you. This is a unified effort. This is, and we got used to saying, Michael Williams, the founder and president, the Grand Poobah, and all of the other titles. All of you guys know that none of that is something that even absorbs into me at all. We are, as Ethan said, we are one. And even the people who are not a part of the gospel revolution, we are one with you. Mm-hmm. And you are one with us, like it or not. So all of you that we criticize, you are one with us. So show me how your doctrine also includes that we are one with you. And it's like, I think we'll find some room for some agreement for sure.
And so it is, we must leave you, family and friends. If you'd like to know anything about the Gospel Revolution, then call our office on
832-318-9339.
And speak to us about how you want to participate. Or go to www.gospelrevolution.com and hit the connect link. You can find us on your favorite social media network, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Please be sure to hit that subscribe, share, and like button on whatever platform you are listening. Now it's good night from Daniel Rouse in the frozen tundra.
And it's good night right here in Clarksville from Michael Williams. Gosh, you guys, again, thank you so much. We finished up the year fairly strong, and financially, we took a lot of losses, and we had some new support come in that we'll be talking to you a little bit more about.
And it is Happy New Year's from William Ethan Massengill. And I just want to say, take care, guys. We love you, and have a great night.
We sure hope that you enjoyed today's Powercast. And remember, we'll be here to do the same thing all over again next week. Only,
bueno.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you see. A perfect yet unique, righteous, holy. Yeah. When you feel lost and alone, staring at the unknown, and these words be the compass that guides you right home. We are one, we are love, we are. Know where you gotta be, nothing to complete. It's not a thing that you need, you're the love. Just remember to breathe and take a second off. Look, I'm just trying to remind you that you're perfectly divine, flawlessly designed. When you feel lost and alone, staring at the unknown, let these words be the compass.
Deconstructing religion and barbecuing the sacred cows of Christianity before your very eyes. You are listening to
The Gospel Revolution.